The alien war veteran leaned back in his chair, his weathered face a map of scars and stories. His audience, a dozen eager soldiers from various species, sat in hushed anticipation. Each bore the distinct features of their kind, scaled, feathered, or smooth-skinned, united by a single shared trait: youth. Their eyes gleamed with curiosity, waiting for Karvik to speak. "I've fought in countless wars," he began, his voice deep and gravelly. "Seen things that would shatter the strongest minds. But there's one encounter I'll never forget. One that changed my understanding of strength, survival, and what it means to fight." The room grew still, the ambient hum of the bass fading into the background. A young soldier with emerald-hued scales leaned forward, unable to contain himself. "Is it true, sir? Did you really fight alongside a Deathworlder?" Karvik's eyes twinkled, the faintest hint of amusement breaking through his stoic demeanor. "Ah, the humans. Yes, I did. And let me tell you, they're nothing like what you'd expect." The soldiers exchanged skeptical glances. For most of them, Earth, classified as a death world, was the stuff of myths, a planet where survival seemed impossible. The notion that fragile, soft-skinned beings could thrive there was absurd. "Fragile," Karvik echoed, as if reading their thoughts. "That's what I thought too, until I met one, Captain Daniel Carter. He didn't look like much. Average height, wiry build, and no natural armor or enhanced senses. Compared to our kind, he seemed insignificant." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. But appearances can be deceiving. The soldiers listened intently, their skepticism slowly giving way to intrigue. "Earth," Karvik continued, "isn't just any death world. It's a crucible, a place where everything, weather, wildlife, even the microorganisms, wants to kill you. Hurricanes that can tear apart cities, predators that stalk the night, diseases that can cripple a being in hours. And yet humans endure. Not just endure, they thrive." One soldier raised a hand, his bioluminescent skin flickering with curiosity. "How? How can they survive such constant danger?" Karvik chuckled, a deep rumble that filled the room. "Adaptability, ingenuity, resilience. You see, while most species evolve to fit their environment, humans adapt their environment to fit them. They turn hostile landscapes into homes. They face threats head-on. Not with brute strength, but with creativity and determination." The room was silent, the soldiers hanging on his every word. "When I first met Carter," Karvik said, "I underestimated him. We were stationed on an alien colony, under siege by a merciless enemy. Our forces were outnumbered, our supplies dwindling. The situation seemed hopeless. And then Carter stepped forward. He didn't wait for orders or guidance. He assessed the terrain, the enemy's movements, and devised a plan that no one else could have imagined." "What kind of plan?" the scaled soldier asked, his voice tinged with awe. Karvik leaned forward, his expression intense. "He used the terrain against them, crafted traps from nothing but local resources and salvage tech. He turned our weaknesses into strengths. While we hesitated, bound by protocol and fear, he acted. And in doing so, he saved us all." The soldiers exchanged glances, their disbelief giving way to admiration. Karvik's gaze swept over them, his voice firm and unwavering. "Humans may seem fragile, but their strength lies in their spirit. They don't break. They bend, adapt, and rise again. And that, my friends, is why you should never underestimate a Deathworlder." Karvik's voice lowered, pulling his audience closer with its gravity. "You can't fully grasp a Deathworlder until you understand their home. Earth, when I first heard the description, I thought it was an exaggeration, propaganda to build fear around humanity. But the reports weren't exaggerated. If anything, they didn't go far enough." The soldiers listened, their curiosity sharpening into fascination. "Imagine," Karvik continued, "a place where molten rock tears through the ground without warning, where storms rage with winds that can topple entire cities, where oceans, vast and unrelenting, swallow everything in their path. Earth is alive in a way most of our worlds aren't, violent, chaotic, and utterly indifferent to the lives it holds. He let the weight of his words sink in before continuing. But the real terror isn't the planet itself. It's the creatures. Humans grew up surrounded by predators. Wolves, big cats, venomous snakes. In the oceans, beasts that dwarf anything we've seen in battle. Yet the humans survived. Not because they were stronger, not because they were faster, but because they were smarter. A soldier with shimmering feathers tilted his head. So they rely entirely on intelligence? Karvik shook his head. Intelligence is part of it. But there's more. Resilience. A stubbornness to keep going no matter the odds. I remember Carter telling me about diseases on Earth. Tiny, invisible enemies that can destroy you from within. He said, on my world, you get sick, you survive, and you come back stronger. Humans don't just endure adversity. They grow from it. He gestured broadly as if encompassing all the known galaxy. We evolve slowly over generations. But humans? They adapt in real time. They learn, innovate, and improvise faster than any species I've seen. Take Carter, for example. The first time I saw him in action, we were pinned down in enemy territory, out of supplies, with no way to call for reinforcements. Most of us were ready to accept the inevitable. The room was silent, the soldiers utterly absorbed. Not Carter, Karvik said, his voice almost reverent. He scouted the terrain, gathered resources, and created solutions where none should have existed. He used local plants of all things, to make diversions. Combined their properties with alien tech he barely understood. In hours, he turned a no-win situation into a calculated strike that bought us time. Humans don't see obstacles. They see puzzles waiting to be solved. A soldier with segmented eyes blinked slowly. But wouldn't their fragility hold them back? A body so prone to injury? Karvik smirked. You'd think so, wouldn't you? But it's the opposite. Their fragility is part of their strength. A broken bone? They heal. They come back. They learn how not to break next time. Their biology isn't remarkable until you see how they push it. They've trained their bodies to go further, harder, longer than seems possible. And when the body gives out, their minds keep them going. That's what makes them unstoppable. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the soldiers. It's not their size or strength that makes humans dangerous. It's their refusal to accept limits. The most vivid memory I have of Carter, Karvik began, his voice grave, is from the Battle of Gorik's Canyon. It wasn't just a skirmish. It was a massacre waiting to happen. We were outnumbered 10-1, trapped in a narrow valley with the Vork closing in. Their forces were a nightmare. Coordinated telepathically, relentless, and equipped with acid-based weaponry that could dissolve armor in seconds. For most of us, it felt like the end. He paused, his expression darkening. The Vork don't take prisoners. They don't negotiate. They conquer, consume, and move on. When their first wave hit, it was chaos. Soldiers panicked. Commanders faltered. Even I felt it, the creeping certainty of doom. But then there was Carter. Karvik's voice softened, as if recalling something sacred. He was wounded before the battle even started. A Vork ambush had left him with a gash in his side that would have taken most of us out of the fight. But Carter didn't stop. Blood soaking his uniform, he took charge when no one else would. His voice cut through the panic like a blade, giving orders with a calmness that defied the situation. And somehow we listened. The soldiers around Karvik exchanged glances, their awe palpable. What did he do? One asked. Karvik's gaze grew distant. He looked at the canyon walls, at the Vork's formations, and he saw something the rest of US couldn't. Opportunity. He turned the terrain into a weapon. With a handful of volunteers, he scaled the cliffs under enemy fire, hauling explosives made from scavenged Vork tech. He set traps along their advance, controlled rock slides, improvised mines, anything he could rig in time. He turned their strength into their weakness. A young soldier with translucent skin leaned forward. But with those odds, how could it have been enough? It wasn't, Karvik admitted. Not at first. But Carter understood something we didn't. The Vork relied on telepathic coordination. Disrupt that, and their strength became chaos. So he devised a plan to cut through their command link. Using scavenged equipment, he and a team of engineers jerry-rigged a signal jammer from broken Vorktech. It shouldn't have worked. By all rights, it was a desperate gamble. His lips twitched into a faint smile. But it did. When the Vork's command structure collapsed, their perfect formations fell apart. Suddenly, they weren't an unstoppable force. They were confused, vulnerable. That gave us the edge we needed. One of the soldiers shook his head, disbelief etched on his face. But Carter was injured. How did he keep going? Karvik's eyes hardened. That's the thing about humans. Pain doesn't stop them. Fear doesn't stop them. I saw him take hits that would have killed anyone else. Acid burns on his arm, shrapnel in his leg, and he didn't slow down. He just kept moving, kept leading. It wasn't just his tactics that saved us. It was his sheer refusal to give up. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. When reinforcements finally arrived, the Vork were in retreat. A victory none of us thought possible. And Carter? He was barely standing, held together by willpower alone. But the look in his eyes, it wasn't relief. It was determination, like he was already thinking about the next fight. The room was silent, the soldiers transfixed by the weight of Karvik's words. That's what makes humans different, he said finally. Not their strength, not their technology. It's their ability to endure, to rise even when everything is against them. Carter didn't just save us that day. He showed us what it truly means to fight. Karvik let the silence stretch for a moment, the weight of his words lingering over the group. The soldiers' expressions ranged from awe to disbelief, but none dared interrupt. Finally, one of them spoke, their voice hesitant. Do all humans fight like that? Or was this Carter special? The veteran's face softened into something resembling a smile, though it was tinged with sadness. Carter was special, yes, but not because he was unique among his kind. What made him remarkable is that he embodied what all humans are capable of. Every human carries that spark, that drive to keep going, no matter the odds. Carter just happened to show it when it mattered most. The soldiers exchanged glances, still struggling to reconcile the idea of these so-called fragile creatures with the unstoppable force Karvik described. One, a wiry soldier with eyes like glowing coals, leaned forward. But why? What drives them to such extremes? Is it instinct? Fear? Pride? Karvik's gaze turned distant, his voice softening as he answered. It's hope. Humans fight for more than survival. They fight because they believe things can be better. Even when the odds are stacked against them, even when everything points to defeat, they cling to the belief that tomorrow can be brighter. And it's not just for themselves. They fight for each other, for their families, their comrades, even for strangers they've never met. That's what sets them apart. They're not just survivors. They're protectors. Another soldier, his body covered in glistening plates, frowned thoughtfully. But hope isn't a strategy. It doesn't win battles. Karvik nodded slowly. No, it doesn't. But it fuels everything else. Their adaptability, their resilience, their creativity, it all stems from that core belief. When Carter scaled that cliff, when he faced those Vork, he wasn't thinking about himself. He was thinking about the colonists we were trying to protect, about the soldiers who depended on him. Hope gave him the strength to push through the pain, to keep fighting when logic said it was impossible. The group fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Finally, the soldier with bioluminescent scales spoke, his voice quiet but firm. And what did you learn from them, sir? From the humans? Karvik's expression softened further, a rare vulnerability crossing his face. I learned that strength isn't about how hard you can hit or how much you can endure. It's about why you fight. Humans taught me that. They taught me that true strength comes from purpose, from protecting what matters most. And that makes them the most dangerous species I've ever encountered. Because they'll fight for something bigger than themselves. And that makes them unstoppable. The room grew heavy with silence, the soldiers deep in thought. Finally, one of them spoke, their voice barely above a whisper. What happened to Carter? Karvik's jaw tightened, his gaze falling to the floor. He didn't make it out of the war. The Vork eventually retreated, and the colony was saved. But Carter, he gave everything. Even when his body gave out, his mind and spirit kept him going until the end. He didn't just save us, he inspired us. Even now, I carry what he taught me. The soldiers absorbed this in silence, the reality of the story weighing heavily on them. Karvik straightened in his seat, his eyes sweeping over the group. And that's why I tell you this story. Not just to honor him, but to remind you. The galaxy is vast, full of beings stronger, faster, and more advanced than you. But if you ever face a human, remember this. They don't fight because they're the strongest. They fight because they believe in something worth fighting for. And that makes them the most formidable opponents you'll ever face. The soldiers nodded, their expressions serious. Karvik leaned back, his voice quieter now. So, when you hear tales of Deathworlders, don't dismiss them as myths. Humans are real. Their stories are real. And if you ever stand beside one, or against one, you'll understand what I mean. The soldiers sat in silence, reflecting on everything they just heard. The gravity of Karvik's tale settling deep into their minds.